Have you ever sat in a quiet room, waiting for a phone call that never comes? You spent your whole life raising your children with love, care, and countless sacrifices. Yet now, it feels like they're slipping away, ignoring you, or worse, no longer respecting you. The silence is deafening, and the question lingers in your mind. Where did I go wrong? It hurts, doesn't it? The very people you devoted yourself to now seem distant, and no matter how much you try to reconnect, the gap only seems to widen. But let me tell you something important. Reacting with anger, guilt, or sadness won't mend the bond. In fact, it might push them even further away. But here's the good news. There are wise and powerful steps you can take to regain peace, dignity, and even respect, all without conflict, without begging for their attention, and without losing yourself in the process. In today's video, I'm sharing 8 transformative actions that have helped countless elderly parents mend broken relationships with their children. These are practical, thoughtful strategies rooted in wisdom and experience that can help you do the same. Whether you feel neglected, unappreciated, or simply want to strengthen your connection with your children, these insights will guide you toward a path of healing and renewed respect. Let's dive in. When the very people we raised and nurtured begin to disregard us, the pain is unlike any other. It cuts deep, leaving behind a sense of betrayal and heartache. In those moments, it's natural to feel an overwhelming urge to lash out, to demand answers, to make them understand our pain. You may find yourself wanting to say, "How could you treat me like this after everything I've done for you?" But before you let those emotions take control, stop. Take a breath, because acting out of anger rarely leads to understanding. It often drives the distance even further. Consider the story of Mr. Tanaka, a retired school teacher in his 70s. His children, once the center of his world, had grown distant. They rarely visited, and when they did, the conversations were brief, almost obligatory. One day, after yet another unanswered phone call, frustration swelled within him. His instinct was to call his son and demand, "Do you even care about me anymore?" But just as he reached for the phone, he hesitated. Instead, he chose to step outside. He took a quiet walk in the nearby park, letting the cool breeze calm his mind. As he strolled, memories surfaced. The years of devotion as a teacher, the sacrifices he made for his family, the laughter of his children when they were young. And in that moment of reflection, he came to a realization. His worth was not defined by how often his children called. It was not something that could be given or taken away. His dignity, his value, was his own. This story holds a powerful lesson. Reacting in anger does not earn respect. It diminishes it. When emotions run high, take a step back, pause, breathe, reflect. In that space of clarity, you regain control, not over your children's actions, but over your own sense of self-worth. And from there, real conversations and healing can begin. Rebuild your own life. Find new purpose. When you feel overlooked or forgotten by your children, it's easy to fall into the trap of waiting. Waiting for their calls, waiting for their visits, waiting for them to remember how much you matter. But waiting rarely leads to change. Instead of placing your happiness in their hands, shift your focus back to yourself. Start rebuilding your life, not for their attention, but for your own fulfillment. Because when you live with purpose and joy, your energy shifts, and that shift is impossible to ignore. Take the story of Mrs. Elena, a widow in her late 60s. When her husband passed away, her world changed overnight. At first, her children checked in on her, but as time went on, the visits became infrequent, the phone calls shorter, until one day they stopped altogether. The loneliness was suffocating. She spent days staring at the silent phone, longing for connection. But one morning, as she sat by the window watching the sun rise, she made a decision. She would no longer wait for others to bring happiness into her life. She reached into her cupboard, pulled out a packet of seeds, and stepped outside to her garden. What started as a simple attempt to pass the time quickly blossomed into something much greater. She found joy in nurturing her plants, in the rhythm of watering and pruning, in seeing life grow from her own hands. Soon, gardening became her passion. She joined a local gardening club, met new friends, and began sharing her harvest with neighbors. The quiet loneliness that once filled her home was replaced with laughter, conversation, and a renewed sense of purpose. Then, one day, her daughter called unexpectedly. "Mom, I've been thinking about you lately. You sound so happy these days. What's your secret? That phone call wasn't just a check in, it was the start of something deeper. Her children began visiting more, drawn not by obligation, but by admiration. They saw their mother as someone thriving, someone vibrant, someone with a life of her own. The lesson is simple. A parent who is fulfilled is harder to ignore. When you create meaning in your own life, people, your children included, are naturally drawn to you. So instead of waiting for them to return, take the first step toward your own happiness. Start that hobby you've always wanted to try. Join a local group, volunteer. Rediscover passions you once set aside. Because the joy you cultivate within yourself not only enriches your life, it might just bring your children back to you in ways you never expected. Communicate your feelings wisely. When your children become distant or seem to no longer prioritize your relationship, it's natural to feel hurt, unappreciated, and even resentful. You may find yourself wondering, why don't they call me? Don't they care about me anymore? The frustration builds, and in moments of pain, the temptation to lash out grows stronger. You might want to say, after everything I've done for you, is this how you treat me? But while these feelings are valid, expressing them through anger or guilt can often backfire, pushing your children even further away. Instead of letting frustration take over, take a step back and think about how you communicate. Words are powerful. They can either create a bridge to connection or build a wall of defensiveness. A gentle, heartfelt approach works far better than blame or criticism. When you share your emotions in a way that invites understanding rather than conflict, you create space for meaningful reconnection. Take the story of Mr. Peterson, a retired carpenter in his late 70s. His son, James, had once been close to him, but over the years, life got busy. Work, family, responsibilities, they all piled up, and before long, James barely called or visited. Every evening, Mr. Peterson would sit by the window, hoping to see his son's car pull into the driveway. But the days stretched into weeks, and the silence became heavier. One evening, after yet another day without a call, Mr. Peterson felt a surge of frustration. He picked up his phone, ready to demand answers. But then he paused. He realized that calling his son in anger might only push him further away. Instead, he sat down at his kitchen table, took out a sheet of paper, and wrote a letter. In the letter, he didn't accuse James of neglect. He didn't guilt-trip him or demand attention. Instead, he simply expressed his emotions with warmth and sincerity. James, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I miss our conversations. I miss hearing about your life. I just want you to know that I'm always here, and I'm proud of you no matter what. A few days later, the phone rang. It was James. The letter had touched him in a way that anger never could. He admitted that he had been caught up in his own responsibilities and hadn't realized how much time had passed. That one heartfelt message led to something unexpected: regular phone calls, weekend visits, and a renewed bond between father and son. The key lesson here is simple: communicate with care. Instead of focusing on what your children aren't doing, express what they mean to you. Instead of saying, "You never call me," try, "I miss our time together." Instead of demanding, "Why don't you visit?" say, "I've been thinking about you and hope we can catch up soon." The way you frame your words can make all the difference. When you choose understanding over accusation, warmth over frustration, you open the door to healing. The goal isn't to force your children into guilt-driven interactions. It's to create genuine, lasting reconnection built on love, not obligation. Set healthy boundaries. Teach others how to treat you. Respect is a two-way street. As much as you want your children to honor and appreciate you, you must first demonstrate self-respect by establishing healthy boundaries. Boundaries are not walls to shut people out, nor are they acts of punishment. They are essential markers of self-worth, lines that define what you will and will not accept in your relationships. Many parents, in their unconditional love for their children, sacrifice their own well-being in the hope that such devotion will be recognized and reciprocated. They make themselves available at all hours, say yes even when they're exhausted, and excuse disrespectful behavior just to maintain a connection. But when you allow mistreatment or neglect to persist unchecked, you unknowingly send the message that you are willing to tolerate it. And over time, this can lead to feelings of resentment, frustration, and emotional exhaustion. By setting boundaries, you do more than protect your peace. You teach others how to treat you with dignity. You remind your children that while you love them deeply, you are also a person with your own needs, emotions, and limits. The story of Mrs. Rosa, a mother who reclaimed her self respect. Mrs. Rosa, a retired nurse in her 70s, had always been the pillar of support for her family. She had raised her son, Daniel, with care and generosity, always putting his needs before her own. But as Daniel grew older, he became increasingly demanding. He rarely visited unless he needed something: money, childcare for his kids, or simply someone to unload his frustrations on. Whenever Daniel called with a request, Mrs. Rosa would drop everything to help, hoping that by being available, he would appreciate her more. But instead, the pattern continued. He took her kindness for granted, assumed she would always be there, and failed to acknowledge her own time and needs. One afternoon, after yet another last-minute demand to babysit his children, Mrs. Rosa felt a shift within herself. She had been canceling her own plans for years just to accommodate Daniel's requests. But in that moment, she realized something important. Her time mattered too. She deserved the same respect and consideration that she had always given to others. Instead of immediately agreeing, she took a deep breath and responded with a calm but firm voice. "Daniel, I love you, but I'm not available today. I've made plans for myself." Her words surprised him. He was taken aback, even a little annoyed. After all, she had never said no before. But Mrs. Rosa held her ground. She knew that if she kept giving in, the cycle would never end. At first, Daniel pulled away, upset that his mother was no longer at his beck and call. But over time, he began to notice something. His mother wasn't waiting by the phone anymore. She wasn't dropping everything to serve his needs. Instead, she was going out more, meeting friends, attending yoga classes, and even joining a local book club. She was living her own life, on her own terms. This change forced Daniel to reevaluate his behavior. He realized how much he had been taking his mother for granted. Slowly, his attitude shifted. He started calling her, not just when he needed something, but to genuinely check in. He became more considerate of her time, asking if she was free rather than assuming she would be. And in doing so, their relationship grew healthier and more balanced. The key lesson: boundaries strengthen relationships, not weaken them. Setting boundaries doesn't mean pushing your children away. It doesn't mean you love them any less. It simply means that you value your own time, energy, and emotional health. When you establish clear expectations for how you wish to be treated, you create healthier dynamics, not just for yourself, but for your entire family. A parent who respects their own needs commands respect from others. When you teach your children that your time is valuable, they learn to cherish the moments they share with you rather than taking them for granted. So, if you find yourself constantly sacrificing your peace to meet every demand, take a step back. Ask yourself, am I allowing others to treat me in a way that diminishes my worth? If the answer is yes, it's time to make a change. Your love for your children is limitless, but that does not mean your energy and time should be. Set your boundaries with kindness but firmness. Honor your own needs, and watch as the respect you give yourself transforms the way others treat you in return.